Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
The next sadistic journey into the most depraved regions of the Quake universe.
The Quake Mission Packs aren't talked about as much as the expansions for Doom or Wolfenstein. This is interesting because they actually provide the game with brand new content like new weapons, enemies, and alternate fire modes, but they kinda just came and went. The Quake Mission Packs are fascinating little pieces of FPS history, and they are important at least when it comes to the game's modding scene. Quake 1.5, for example, directly rips the laser cannon from the first mission pack and they throw it into the mod. That's the mission pack we'll be taking a look at today, and I do prefer it out of the two released. Quake Mission Pack 1 is known as Scourge of Armagon, and features an exclusive antagonist called, well, Armagon. We'll get to him more later and his disappointing boss fights, but let's talk about the positives first. Mission Pack 1 has a hub area like in the base game, but this time it's located in a military HQ. This makes way more sense than starting out in a dark, depressing castle to select your difficulty. I also like that this expansion pack gives you all of the weapons very quickly, and it doesn't waste your time introducing you to the enemies either. Speaking of enemies, the first new monster you will come across is the Centroid, and they shoot out nails at the player. Right off the bat, I've got to say that Armagon's strong suit is not with its new enemies, as the ones that they do include don't change things up very much. At least the Centroids look cool, and they attempt to scatter around on the floor to avoid your gunfire. The other new enemies in Mission Pack 1 consist of the Gremlin and Spike Mine, but none of these are real threats. The Gremlin jumps about and tries to take the player's weapons away, but they're very easy to take care of. The Spike Mines are just floating balls that slowly come towards the player, and if they're close enough, they explode. These are interesting ideas for enemies, don't get me wrong, but they don't reinvent the wheel of Quake's combat loop. The real highlight of Armagon is with the new weapons, in which there are 3 in total. This is a decent amount of exclusive guns, and for the most part, they are very fun to use. The best weapon to use is Mjolnir, as it shoots out powerful bolts of lightning and it deals a ton of damage out to surrounding enemies. When you have enough cells, this hammer is great to bust out and kill a group of bad guys with. Speaking of cell-based weapons, the laser cannon is another new weapon from Mission Pack 1, and it's again very fun to fire. The lasers that shoot out also bounce off the walls, so they do have the opportunity to hit you back. This is an interesting dynamic of the gunplay, and even with that weapon drawback, the laser cannon is still a solid gun. Even though you'll be using it quite a bit during the expansion, the laser gun is not quite a workhorse weapon, and most of the time you'll be taking on levels with the base game guns. This is completely understandable, and while I do want to use the laser gun more often, it seems like all of these FPS expansion weapons aren't mainstays in the roster. Like, nobody really mains the expander from the Duke Nukem 3D Atomic Edition, for example. Speaking of the common Quake weapons, Armagon features a brand new version of the grenade launcher, and it's the worst weapon in the mission pack. The proximity mine launcher fires grenades that can stick onto solid surfaces, and if someone gets close to them, the grenades will explode. I didn't specify enemies in that last sentence because the player can also activate these grenades and then they blow up in your fucking face. I guess you would call this the risk versus reward factor of the mine launcher, but it just makes me not want to use it at all. The laser cannon and Thor's hammer both share cell ammo with the lightning gun, but all of these have clear utility within combats. They also have little to no downsides, which cannot be said for the mine launcher that could get you killed pretty easily. Armagon has cool enemies and for the most part good guns, but what is the level design like in Mission Pack 1? I think that this mission pack does exactly what it needs to do and expand the scope of Quake's level design. Map 1 is called the Pumping Station, and and right away it gives the player a clear objective. This level feels more involved compared to just collecting the keys and going through the exit door, and these little scripted events are welcomed by me. The player needs to find a way into the pumping room and then destroy the pumps to end the level. Map 1 is solid, and this level of quality continues all throughout episode 1. The Lost Mine is probably my favourite level in Armagon's first episode, as the collapsing rocks alter the environment around you, and it's great to see. You can tell that the designers were very ambitious when they made this mission pack, and some of these sequences wind up being even more memorable and impressive than the base game. Episode 1 ends with you flying through this dimensional gateway, and it perfectly sets up Episode 2, which admittedly isn't as interesting as the last episode. Episode 2 gives us gothic castles, spooky cathedrals, and environments that you would associate with Quake most, but the levels just aren't as intricate as the previous ones. That's not to say that Episode 2 doesn't have good levels, because they all share the same quality as Episode 1. The Crypt is a personal standout for me, as I love the zombies coming out of the coffins, and the Indiana Jones-like trap in this red room. Episode 3 features some more well-designed levels, with a handful of awesome gimmicks. A couple of these include the tram ride sequence in the first level, and the section where you need to hit each of the buttons to make parts of a room collapse to make a bridge. Episode 3 also contains the best secret level of the expansion, with it being all located in the Void. Originally, it was just a simple multiplayer map, and that's very evident by the lack of a proper layout, but I find the Void backdrop to be far more interesting than what's found in the other two secret levels of the expansion. As a whole, the level design in Mission Pack 1 is consistently pretty damn good, and while the enemies and weapons are more of a mixed bag, they all still make for a solid expansion. Before we discuss the final boss fights, I did want to talk about the underwhelming power-ups. I almost forgot they existed because they don't do a whole lot to shake up the gameplay, but then again, there were some power-ups in the base game that I didn't find useful as well. The best power-up in the entire expansion is the wetsuit, as it more or less acts like the frog suit from Mario 3. It allows you to move around easier and faster when you're underwater, and it also prevents you from drowning, similar to the biosuit from the base game. The wetsuit is a solid alternative to the biosuits, and I found this to be the most useful power-up in my playthrough. The other two power-ups are not as effective, with me finding no real use for the empathy shield, and the Horn of Conjuring also being a mixed bag. The Horn of Conjuring, as the title implies, conjures up a monster to help you out in battle. This sounds like a cool idea, but sometimes the enemy that spawns in is entirely useless. You sometimes get the Shambler, which is fantastic, but then you also sometimes get a dog. This power-up is great in theory, but I found it ultimately to be a huge inconvenience.
Yeah, because she knows all about an inconvenience. And she knows all about that.
And quit school the year after.
When you give birth to your uncle's baby in 6th grade in Covington, wherever, Louisiana, it's an inconvenience.
That being said, the final boss is obviously Armagon, and he is just your typical 90s first-person shooter boss fights. You circle strafe around his attacks, you shoot him a bunch, and you win the game. Lackluster boss fight aside, Mission Pack 1 is a very well-crafted expansion for Quake, and if you want good level design coupled with some fun weapons to try out, then play this game. I appreciate how the designers took some risks and pushed the idea of what a Quake level could be at the time. There are more gimmicks and scripted sequences that will keep the player interested, and some of these set pieces are arguably more engaging than the base game's levels. This mission pack wasn't the end though, and a month later, Dissolution of Eternity was released. For right now, however, the minions of Quake have once again fallen before your mighty hand.